Okay, everybody, what's happening? It's Robert Phoenix, and I'm back. Sunday Night AstroLive. It's a little bit later. I had kind of a bit of a strange little errand I had to take care of tonight, which sent me behind just a little bit, and then some preparation for the show, and here we are. So I'm just going to hang out under the purple light of Saturn here and wait till some of y'all show up, and I think a few of you will, as we move into Sunday night. There's Joan S., Teresa Profont, there's Z. What's happening? What's going on? Let me just check my fantasy football scores, see what's happening. How was everybody tonight? Hello, internet. Yeah. What's happening? Are you ready to rock? Sorry, I had to get that out of my system. Spooky look. It's Scorpio time. Thought I'd bring a little bit of the purple light in here, the purple light of Saturn. Let's see. Here we go. We got Lindsay. CG, what's happening, Lindsay? Been thinking about you. There's Jennifer Rubin. What's up, cuz? Good to see you. PB in the house. Oh, wow. That's purple. You know, I can adjust the purple a little bit. If I can, if I'm a little too purple, I can do some stuff with that. I can adjust. I can even make it more purple. Look at that. This is what happens in the afterlife. This is how you look in the afterlife. Right here. This is it. When you transition, your body takes on this kind of light focus. And you just begin to blend in with everything. Oh, man. Life is fun sometimes. All right, hold on. Maybe it's a little too purple. I got too much of the purple haze going on. Maybe that's a big problem. How's that? Oh, man, that's really kind of intense. That's psychedelic right there. Oh, I love this. Okay, hold on. I'm going to do this. No, I like that backlight a little bit better. This makes me look radioactive and sort of like cancerous. Like I've got skin cancer or some shit. All right, hold on. There we go. That's a little better. I like that. I kind of like the purple effect. Don't you? I'll bring this back here. Right there. Yeah, there we go. That's cool. That's cool. Hey, I got a Trump train going on right here. Trump train. Get on board the Trump train. Oh, man. Sorry. I'm feeling a little lighthearted tonight. If you can't tell already. Okay. Yeah, purple haze all in my brain. Let's see. Who do we have here? Who we got? Laurel Jubin. Is there really such thing as too much purple? I'm reclaiming the purple revolution. This is what I'm doing. I've decided to take back. First, I'm going to take back purple. Then I'm going to reclaim the rainbow. And then I'm going after the unicorn. Russell-J Gould can have the American flag. I'm going after purple. I'm going after the rainbow. And I'm going after the unicorn. By the time I'm done, I will reclaim all three of those. I will be the Lord of Purple. I will be the administrator of the rainbow. And I will be the steward of the unicorn. That's going to happen. And when that happens, the entire universe is going to change. The entire universe will revert back to a previous cosmic order. And that's happening. Purple is my favorite color. Hey, what's happening, Dawn? Portland Zoo cesspool America, the male race is a complete joke. Yep. I'm sorry to hear that. Let's see. What else do we have here? We need some lava lamps now. I won't go too far over that board, Rob. I won't go too far. Let's just stay. I did have like a strobe thing that was going to break out. What am I doing? I am bathing in the light of Saturn. Some people, they get under an ultraviolet lamp. Not me. I am bathing in the purple light of Saturn. I live in Portland. I had to leave a bunch of stuff like, very color out of space. Good to see you, Coach K. Liz Luscious, Sydney, Monday morning, quarantine, 14 days after international flight. If I was in charge of a mercenary army, I would come down there and me and my mercenary army would liberate Sydney. We'd take on all those motherfucking bully cops. We'd go right into Dan Andrews' office. And we'd strip him down into his underwear. We'd make him walk out. In fact, we'd take him and strip him naked, and we'd put his underwear around his face like a mask. And then we'd make him walk out. If I had that mercenary army, we'd come down there, we'd liberate Sydney, and then we'd dare the Chinese to do something. We'd dare them. Hey, Isaac, welcome to the show. Carrie Rose is here. Posted some full moon anti-mask propaganda on IG last night. I tell you, what's really interesting is that we're going to get into this tonight. I'm going to talk about Pallas Athena. And I want to talk about pattern recognition because there are some patterns that are emerging right now. We're going to look at where Pallas is, and I'm going to talk about Pallas as an asteroid and some of the attributes that are connected to Pallas. We're going to look at the election night chart once again. We're also going to look at what I call generations of fire. And this is 3 generations, very creative generations of fire brought on by the outer planet, Pluto in Aries, Pluto in Leo, and Pluto in Sagittarius. Not necessarily the times, but the people that were born during those times and the effect that they have on culture. I had a great connection today, great lunch with my kid, and we spent some time hanging out. And I got to learn more about his generation a little bit firsthand, and they're very interesting. They're very, very interesting. And I've been doing some readings for some older Gen Z people, and they're the ones that I've been doing the readings for have been fantastic. All guys. And that tells you something, right? That tells you something right there. That every now and then I get some Gen Z gal readings. These were all 3 guys, and all 3 of them were very interesting in very different kinds of ways. Actually, I've done 4, 5 now, and all 5 of them were really interesting in very different kinds of ways. 4 of them, one of them was Teresa's son, a really cool young guy. And then they were all kind of around the same age, like 20, 19, 20. I think Yolis was maybe 22. And then the youngest one was, look who's here. It's the J-Man. He's in the house. The Astrological cat. I got to get that tune back up and running. Here you go. How do you look in purple, Jasper? How do you look in purple? There. We had a sad night tonight. At least I did. I had a sad night. So there are a lot of stray cats in this neighborhood. And there was this one stray cat. He was a real sweetheart. And, he was one of those cats that made friends. You could tell he made friends with the people who lived in the neighborhood. Cats will come by and they'll hang out and get fed and stuff. And he was pretty tame, pretty docile, this cat. He'd come and hang out on the lawn. And I've only been here since May, so we got a lot of them. But this guy was distinct, and he had a kind of a tuxedo coat. And I was driving home tonight, and it's really sad. I mean, I saw him lifeless in the middle of the street. And that was rough. That was kind of rough. So I had to, I didn't, I just didn't want him to get run over and shit like that. So anyway, we had to take care of him a little bit there. And so it's rough, man. It's kind of rough out there. And but it's, sometimes we have to get in touch with these mortalities, right? We have to get in touch with these mortalities sometimes. It just keeps us in the game, especially when we're in the month of Scorpio and people die, or we deal with death. I mean, this is we're entering into the underworld now. I mean, Halloween is a gateway. Halloween is a portal into the underworld, and it really takes us. The time changes. It gets darker at night here in the northern hemisphere. We're really kind of entering into that symbolic eighth house, and it's a powerful, powerful time. And it's also a very magical time too. And death has one of those abilities to be so deeply transcendent and profound and really deep. I know, and I don't want to. It's just deep. I mean, to me, it's a. I mean, there have been times when I've really connected with death and just feel so alive, and I know that's kind of a cliche, but it's true. It's very, very true. And, we often run away from death and mortality. And really, every time it's come into my life in a really profound way, it touches every single, cornice and fiber of one's being. So we're in that month now. I mean, we are deeply into Scorpio now. We've been here for 9 days, and the Halloween is definitely the portal time, for this period. And then we come through, and again, we're dealing with, Western mundane, tropical astrology, and mundane is what I practice here on this show mostly. And then we move into Sagittarius, and it's moving from the eighth house to the ninth house, literally from darkness to light, for that night of the dark soul, and coming into the higher mind, or the higher light of reason, where we have something now, something that we need to attach a system, or we need to create a language, or have something that represents the sort of the numinous experience of the time through the eighth house. I mean, that's how it really theoretically should be. So wherever Scorpio is in your chart, right, it is a precursor for that movement from Scorpio to Sagittarius, literally from darkness into a type of light. But Sagittarius, we're going to get into Pluto and Sagittarius tonight again, as it relates to Pluto and Leo and Pluto and Aries. Sagittarius is a celestial light. It really is sort of this crystalline light of the higher mind and higher consciousness, unlike the furnace and the inferno of Aries, which is the self, or that warm, glowing, radiant, jubilant celebration of the self and all of its rich creative potential, which is Leo. Sagittarius is the light of the mind of God, right? And it interpenetrates our awareness, so that we can somehow create a language around the things that we've experienced in the eighth house, which again theoretically should be connected to numinosity and the deep, right? So that we can have a frame of reference. Like if you look at the shaman who goes through the eighth house experience, when he goes to the underworld, he has to come up with something that can describe what his experience has been. Oftentimes, it's not necessarily a treatise or a tract or a set of 10 laws that have come down from God on top of a mountaintop, although those things are certainly representative of the 12th house. Sometimes it can be a song, which is significant in terms of being able to communicate and translate what that individual experienced. So this is where we are now, but we're not in Sagittarius yet. we're just in the deep trough of Scorpio now. We're really entering into. We'll look at the chart of the moment tonight as well to understand where we are. Now, if we were playing the sidereal game, we'd be entering into Ophiuchus, and Ophiuchus being the sort of the lizard king, sort of the serpent healer of the sidereal zodiac. And I think it's interesting that Ophiuchus is left out for a number of reasons. And one could make a case that it's left out because, well, number one, there is more of a, how do I say this? I don't use the word dualistic, but there is more of a chromatic transition from Scorpio to Sagittarius, right? We go from dark to this kind of crystalline light of the mind of God, or higher consciousness, and which I think works, right? When you bring Ophiuchus into the mix, thanks, Jasper. When you bring Ophiuchus into the mix, it's a transition from sort of the underworld and the furnace of Scorpio, and then you get into this sort of uncoiling of of Ophiuchus as this kind of serpentine, character or serpentine archetype, and then theoretically you move into the higher mind or the higher consciousness of Sagittarius. Now, to that effect or that regard, it actually kind of works if you look at Ophiuchus as a representative or a symbol of Kundalini, because when you start at the base of the spine, theoretically you would be in first, second chakra, which would be Scorpio, and then by the time you would get to the pineal, the crown, or the ninth house, which would be the crown of the chart and the mind of God, then Ophiuchus could be that intermediary which connects those two during that process. So it's an interesting thing to think about if you look at it from that perspective. I've always felt that between Scorpio and Ophiuchus, that there's unless you look at it from that perspective, I think they're too close in some ways, right? So Ophiuchus, if you play with the sidereal chart, can act as a bridge, but I do think that the bridge in that regard is sort of it's the spiral up the column, or the seven chakras to here, right, and then beyond. Other than that, I do like the more monochromatic sort of tension between Scorpio and Sagittarius. So you could play with both and, see how it works, see how it feels. I, again, practice Western tropical Placidus astrology. That's what I practice, and seems to have worked out pretty well for me since I jumped into the game kind of hardcore right around 2008, 2009. So 12 years in pretty intensely, doing lots of charts and lots of writing and lots of research and lots of mundane astrology, and a lot of those mundane astrological kinds of explorations have really kind of meted out this this methodology of Western Placidus tropical astrology. And that's not to say that some people haven't found some kind of merit in sidereal astrology. I think there can be, but I've never, even in my own life, I've never, if I move my chart into sidereal, my moon and my Mercury and my Venus go back to Virgo, and in my natal chart, they're in Libra, and I feel much more like Moon in Libra, Moon in Mercury, Moon in Libra and Venus than it being in Virgo, because I'm the least fucking Virgo person you'll ever meet, even being born a Virgo. And sidereally, it still throws me back into Virgo. So anyway, I think there's a there. But I also think that, again, based on my peregrinations through astrology, this model, the one that was laid out by Ptolemy, seems to, at least for me, work the best. And that's what we work with. So again, from Scorpio to Sagittarius, the monochromatic shift from the dark night to the higher light, or, the light of the mind of God, that epiphany, the place of epiphany from the ninth house. So we'll get into that. We'll look at the chart at the moment. and we'll explore a little bit of that. We'll look at Pallas Athena, some pattern recognition, and also Pallas Athena connected to the pineal gland and telepathy. So we're going to get into a little Pallas Athena tonight. I think that'll be interesting for some of you because there is a reason why I'm talking about Pallas Athena. And we're going to look at I had a moment. In fact, I've had two moments over the last 48 hours that have been pretty interesting telepathically. So why don't we get into this here? Let's do, I think there was some rough waters a bit on Friday's show. Not really with myself and Russell-J Gould. I actually thought that was kind of an interesting interview. If you haven't seen it, it's over on the other channel. I don't know why I did it for that channel. Normally it doesn't show up there, but I'll bring it over here, and I'll have it over here. It was interesting, and so I think we had, and I have some thoughts about that interview. I'm not going to get into them tonight. I'll probably share more of them tomorrow. But there was some definite heavy sort of. Russell is very, in some ways, divisive. Right, he's one of these people that I think really evokes extreme devotion, or he evokes extreme skepticism. There's really no in between with Russell, which is interesting. And we got some of that in the chat room, and some of it might have had to do with the fact that, I didn't do our invocation. So maybe that had something to do with this. Why don't we go ahead and do that, and let's get that on the public record here. So let's do this. Dear blessed and holy Mother, Father God of the great central sun, which is the universal light, the light of Yeshua, Sananda, Emmanuel, we ask that only the highest and best information and wisdom and truth come through this channel at this time. And that as a result, we are all blessed and graced by the qualities of purity and sacredness, expansion, higher mind, truth, wisdom, intellect, perception, discernment, flexibility, commitment, fortitude, joy, laughter, humor, strength, courage, empathy, compassion, and above all, love. We ask that any karmic residue be cleansed, purified, clarified, and removed from this stream. So be it. All right, let's get cracking. All right. I'm Ophiuchus in Sidereal astrology. I like the Ophiuchus Sag transition. Let's see. What do we have here? Actually, about the invocation, Robert. Yes. I should bring Jacqueline on the show one of these nights. She'd be up for it. I love Jacqueline. She's great. We should get on here and talk one of these nights. Jacqueline, consider that an invitation, okay? Consider it. I watched Friday show second time. Better on the second pass. Oh, what's up with Siri, man? I'd like to know what you thought was better about it, because I respect your opinion, Christine. Let's see. Purple Haze, all in the brain. Yeah, baby. I'd love to share my Ophiuchus lecture with you. Yeah. So, Jacqueline, I want to have you on the show. Hi, Judy. Nice to see you. Good to see you. Let's see. Anybody else? Thank you, I think. All right. Anybody else? Okay, let's get going here. Soothes the tattered souls. There we go. Didn't really connect with your Friday guest. I felt. See, that's it. Russell is. He's polaric. I think he's polaric. Absolutely. My sister's birthday is November 5th. She's going to be 60. I beat her to it. Tell her it's not too bad, at least right now. From this perspective, it's okay. It was a little bit like 59. Let's see. Anything else? Anything else? Anything else? Anything else? Anything else? Anything else? I think we're good. The LA Shines, we're going to second lockdown. That is such bullshit, man. This whole lot. Okay, let's get into this. He was hard to listen to. Seems to live in a fantasy, even if he's right. You know, I'd love to look at Russell's chart. I know he's a Libra. Sticky, what's happening? My lectures don't have my explanation. What did she say? What did I should fix them in the voice? JP, why don't you just come on my show? Just come on my show one of these nights. You and I'll talk. We'll hang out. How's that sound? That'd be a good thing. Lori says, bottom line, he's making extraordinary claims which require extraordinary evidence, in my view. Hi, Leanne. Nice to see you. It's a lot there, right? It's a lot there. So one of the things that, you know, I had other stuff. Like I had other stuff that I was going to bring up with Russell. And some of it was real. I mean, you know, I kind of hit him with a photon torpedo at one point. But I knew that I was going to do that, and I warned him ahead of time. But there was something else that I had that was really very damning, and it was essentially the state and court of Wisconsin neither recognized neither himself nor David, and David Wood Miller, and there's the documents online. It's not hard to find, and they were literally just like kicked right out of court. And I didn't really want to bring that up. In some ways, it would have been a bit piling on. I had to pick and choose because I part of me wanted to flesh Russell out and see really what he had to say, if he could, you know, kind of make it all coherent in some ways. And I wasn't sure we got there completely. Although I did like his coin. The coin was very, very cool. Very, very cool. And by the way, crazy is okay with me. Really smart people are often quirky. Yes, they are. They are crazy. They are. Yes. I think all of you are fucking quirky. What does that mean? It means you're all probably really smart. So, okay. So on Friday night, I had a little discussion, a little late night discussion. And it kind of went like this. I said the anybodies who were somebody are no longer going to be able to be here, and there will no longer be somebodies who can be anybody, or something along those lines. I was just kind of getting into it. And then I thought to myself, we are witnessing the passing of the age of giants. And the giants are leaving us. Because I kind of know what's out there, right? I know what's out there. And I know what's going to come at some point. And there will be giants amongst us once again. But it's not going to be for a little while. Like maybe 10 years, I think. We'll see them again. We'll see them arise again. But maybe in about 10 years. So, you know, and I was thinking about this. This is part of the conversation, that the giants amongst us are leaving. So the next day I found out that Sean Connery died. And it's like and I was really being pretty specific about a generation that had carved out a really unique status in art and music and cinema. Like this is a whole group of people that we'll never see again, and we'll never see in the way that they manifested. And what do I mean by that? Well, this is a group of people who were raised on books, and many of them classic books. And whether or not you agree with the timeline of Greek mythology or the various other sundry mythologies, which some of which are, I think, quite telling and probably a bit more real than actually the telling of a mythological tale. But this is what many of them were raised upon. If you come out of World War II England, a number of them went into what we call art school. And there was a very strong emphasis on the arts in England coming out of World War II. And that's where people like Peter Frampton and David Bowie and Mick Jagger and a lot of the English musicians cut their teeth on art school coming out of World War II. And so there's a generation that's a little bit older than that, but still being sort of raised and cultivated in that sort of post-war semi-artistic and creative milieu. And now they are starting to leave us. So Sean Connery certainly fits in that category. Now, Sean Connery is not a baby boomer. Sean Connery is pre-baby boomer, and it's part of the generation that I don't really think has kind of a name associated with it. I've never really been able to figure out what this generation would be called or should be called. And this is the Pluto and Cancer generation, many of whom are still with us, like Klaus Schwab, who would be a perfect villain inside of a James Bond movie, really, is a Pluto in Cancer individual. 8 years younger than Sean Connery, by the way, born 1938. Sean Connery, whose chart we'll look at tonight, was actually born in 1930. So he was a little up there, Mr. Connery was. He was 90 years old. And I think Clint Eastwood is right around, I think Clint is 91 or 90. He's right around the same age as Sean Connery. So a lot of these Pluto and Cancer people have lived a very long time, because that's really kind of the nature of Pluto and Cancer in some ways. They cling, right? They cling on to life, like the crab, like the crustacean on the rock face, the rock face of our existence, with the waves pounding against them constantly. So, but he comes in at a very interesting time that, he's sort of young enough to kind of catch the wave. I think when he got Bond, we're going to look at Dr. No tonight, which was his first movie. We'll look at it astrologically as it relates to Sean Connery's chart. We'll also look at where the planets are now and see if we can, try to find out where Connery's even death aspects or transition aspects come in. So he comes in and he hits. Why don't you look at him instead of me? Why don't we do that? Because this is a guy he was a total, to me. The guy's, he's a consummate actor. He had so many different roles. Never really wanted to be pigeonholed ever. Right? He never wanted to be pigeonholed ever. So let's get a glimpse of the young Sean Connery here. Okay, let's do that. Let's get a glimpse of him. There he is. There's the young Sean Connery right there. Virgo, by the way. Virgo. Saturn on the ascendant, as you'll see. So he comes into London and cinema, although he's Scottish. He was a member of the Scottish National Party. He wanted Scotland to be sovereign. He wanted Scotland to be sovereign. That's what he wanted to be. He was into Scotland being its own country. So he comes in right around 1962. He's 32 years old. A little bit older than some of the younger actors. He's older than Michael Caine, whom he would develop a very close relationship with, another Virgo, by the way. And I think he's a little bit younger than people like Peter O'Toole, although I'd have to check. Might be around the same age as Richard Burton, perhaps a few years younger. So these guys make up the Albert Finney, Sean Connery, Michael Caine, Richard Burton, Peter O'Toole. These guys are the young lions of British cinema. And that they had just an amazing time during the 60s and the 70s. And And so he comes in, he's a little bit older, sort of catches that wave, right? Sort of catches that wave. And he always, oh, look at that. Trump offers condolences for Sean Connery, claims Bond actor. Okay. Here we got Trump and Sean Connery together. All right. Now we're merging universes here. Never liked Daniel Craig. Sorry. Not a fan of his version of Bond. And there he is with his wife, whom he met in Morocco. And they had a very long and devoted relationship. And you can see that in his chart. We'll get there. There they are together. He met her when he was doing the film, The Man Who Would Be King, with this guy right here, Michael Caine, also known as Maurice Micklewhite. And they were good buddies. If you haven't seen The Man Who Would Be King, fantastic movie. Absolutely fantastic movie. Brilliant movie. And here he is, right here, once again, the young Highlander, which is interesting because Sean Connery wasn't Highlander. He did not play the Highlander himself. No, did not do that. But he did play, I believe, the Spanish immortal who helped the Highlander understand his immortality. Here he is on the set of Finding Forrester. A good film. It's a very good film. He shot this, I think, in his 70s. Finding Forrester. Very good movie. Plays a reclusive sort of J.D. Salinger type of character. Again, very devoted to his wife. Right here. You'll see that in the chart when they're together, or at least we'll look at his chart. Here's the Man Who Would Be King is quite interesting. It's sort of got some not so hidden Freemasonic symbolism in the film. That's from Highlander right there, and that is from The Untouchables. This guy has had some just incredible roles. Absolutely remarkable roles. The other thing that's really interesting is he dies during the month of October, right? During the month of October. What do we have here? Right here. Look at this. The Hunt for Red October. The Hunt for Red October. Who we've been dealing with throughout October? Hunter Biden. The Hunt for Red October. And Hunter Biden clearly involved with the CCP. I think it's Sean Connery passing away. The hunt is on. How about that? Little synchromysticism for you right there. Little synchromysticism. So the genesis of Sean Connery, when he was not the first choice for James Bond. The first choice for James Bond, believe it or not, I think it was Cary Grant. I think they wanted Cary Grant in the role, and he didn't take it. And then they thought of Gregory Peck in the role. And believe it or not, they even thought of Roger Moore when they were casting for Dr. No. Now, Roger Moore had been on a very popular British TV show called The Saint, and where he plays a character named Simon Templar. And the producers of the film thought that he was too pretty to play James Bond. Now, they were also looking at Patrick McGoohan, who was also in a very interesting spy movie called Secret Agent Man, which would later kind of evolve and mutate into The Prisoner. But McGowan, I think, either turned it down, they felt like he wasn't quite right. And then the other choice that they were looking for or looking at was David Niven, who I thought would have been a terrible Bond. But I guess he was okay when they cast him in the sort of satirical or farcical version called Casino Royale. So Connery came in. He had a bodybuilding, weightlifting background. And they had a casting call. They were trying to find somebody who was kind of unknown. They'd found somebody else. And he was, what was the guy's name? I'll tell you. He was sort of like the Pete Best of, of movies. Let's see. James Bond. Let's see what we got here. So I'm trying to think who the Dr. No was the first one. I'm trying to think of the guy's name. It's in here somewhere. Give me one sec. Cast. Yeah, so it was a guy, and he couldn't handle it. Oh, here we go. Here, this is what I'm looking for. So the guy who was claimed to have been the first choice, his name is Richard Johnson. He had died on June 5th, 2015. And they had cast him to be the first James Bond. But he couldn't handle it. He could not handle it. He had some other movies, though. He was making movies all the way through the early 70s, and then he did theater. So, he was an actor. He did okay. He did all right. But he was not the guy who was going to play James Bond. So Cary Grant, I think Gregory Peck was there. Fleming wanted the actor Richard Todd, who, interestingly enough, actually looks like Sean Connery. That's kind of weird. That is really weird. Let me show you his picture. That's kind of weird. Check this out. So this is Richard Todd. This is the guy who doesn't that look like Sean Connery? It's like, wow. So I guess they got the guy. He was born in Dublin, so he's Irish. Did he go on to continue to act? Disney, Decline as a Star. He was in Dam Busters. I remember that movie. I watched that as a kid. Yeah. So he sort of goes. He did hit, not being Bond. He was not Bond. Todd was the first choice of author Ian Fleming. So Ian Fleming wanted him. But a scheduling conflict gave the role to Sean Connery. Todd unsuccessfully attempted to produce a film of Ian Fleming's The Diamond Smugglers, and a television series based on the true accounts of the Queen's messengers. He also announced a proposal about William Shakespeare. Todd has now made the most of what he had, which could be summed up as an inability to sit still while there was a horse to leap astride, a swollen river to swim, or a tree to vanish into. Anyway, there was your guy who was supposed to play. Right there. He was born in 1919, which would have put him to be 10 years older. But he actually kind of looks like Sean Connery. So Connery's the guy, and he comes in, and he winds up having a very interesting approach to being cast. He wears a bunch of disheveled clothes and sort of acts like a very gruff and tough guy, and basically shows them how macho he is. And they were like, this guy's got something. We're going to hire him. So they hired him. And then they hooked him up with another guy who took him out, got him tailored up, and then took him to all these nightclubs and casinos in London, and basically tried to enculturate this sort of noble savage, who Sean Connery would play again in a movie called Zardoz. If you haven't seen Zardoz, I highly recommend it. It's brilliant. It's a total acid trip. So they were into shaping and molding this kind of macho, rough character into this kind of urbane and sophisticated version of James Bond. So I'm sure he had a hell of a fun time learning how to be sophisticated and sort of learning the ropes of being an English gentleman, while not necessarily sacrificing his kind of brutality, the savagery that he brought to the role. I mean, he was a dangerous character. Roger Moore was never dangerous. In fact, they kind of went into camp with Roger Moore. It was campy. I didn't like those Bond films. I didn't like them. They were too campy. Pierce Brosnan was okay. He was all right. I don't think he was okay. Timothy Dalton, and then the other guy, Daniel Craig. No, sorry. And Bond is dead. It's over. Now Bond is being played by a woman of color. And hey, that's great, whatever. But everything's being kind of washed into the cancel culture sort of spin cycle. And, everything has its day, it has its time, it has its moment. But there will never, ever be another real Sean Connery or another James Bond. There was never another Bond like Connery. And there'll never be another Sean Connery. Why don't we look at this chart? And we'll punch it up here. So this is Sean Connery's chart, natal chart, born August 25th, 1930, 6:05 p.m., Edinburgh, Scotland. As I said, he was a member of the Scottish National Party. And there were a number of people in England he really didn't care for. He did not care for them very much. Now, this is not really an easy chart. Not an easy chart. We have a sextile between Mars and the sun. Well, you can see that with his intensity, right? Sextile between Mars and Neptune. And he was creative. There was a very creative side to him. And then we have the trine from Saturn to Neptune and Saturn to the sun. And as far as harmonic aspects go, that's it. That is it. That's all Sean Connery, from this perspective, really brings to the table. Everything else tends to be much, much, much more difficult. Much more difficult. But the cool thing is, and this is what, again, I think sets him apart a little bit, is that there's no affliction towards Neptune. Real affliction, like strong affliction, right? We have some minor aspects with Neptune, but we've got the sextile of Mars and the Saturn trine to Neptune, and then the Neptune trine into the ascendant, which is quite good, actually. So other than that, though, he's got some tough planets here. He's got some challenges. Saturn moon squares are interesting, although this is probably really kind of the edge and more Saturn Mercury than actual Saturn moon. Yeah, there's whatever. Saturn is going to be here. So we got the square to Mercury. Yeah, so it's kind of outside the bounds or outside of the orbit of the moon. So it's more Saturn Mercury square. If people have Saturn Mercury squares can have some learning challenges. And they may, at times, even though Mercury's in Virgo here, which is still bright, it's at the 29th degree, conjunct my sun, which is anaretic. So it's not at the kind of the most sort of, how do we say this, luminescent phase of Mercury, which would be really between 0 and 9 degrees, put in the Virgo decan. So this is really in the Taurus decan, right? This is the third decan. So it's much more about kind of the mind acting as sort of a more of a force of nature in some ways, right? When we think about Taurus, we think about kind of the earth and instincts along these lines. So the first 9 degrees of Mercury in the sign of Virgo are all Virgo, and so it's mercurial, it's bright, it's witty, it's sharp in those degrees. And then basically from roughly 9 to 18, it moves into the Capricornian decan, which makes it much more kind of calculating and using the mind to have some kind of more administrative quality, right? It's more about using the mind to understand systems at a higher level. And then when it moves into Taurus, it is much more physical in some ways, and kind of it's losing its steam, obviously, as it moves out of that sign. But it tends to be a bit more kind of grounded and rooted in instinct versus, say, the pure logic of Virgo in the first decan of Mercury, and then into the more kind of administrative or hierarchical idea around the mind and how the mind arranges objects and relationships. So we can kind of see that with Connery. We don't, is he cerebral? To some extent, when you listen to him in the interviews, he's certainly not a dummy, right? But when you get the sense of him, right? When you get the sense of him, and especially when he acts, there's that kind of more, instinctual and kind of visceral quality to Connery. There's a movie he did called A Certain Madness, and my father was a big Sean Connery fan. So I watched this movie, and it speaks exactly to what I'm talking about. Let me see if I can actually track this down. This would be interesting if I can find this. I'm just going to go over here because I don't think it's going to. Let me try this. I don't want to get rid of that. Let's do this. Let's see what we have. This should be interesting because I think this really speaks to the exactly what I'm talking about in terms of the Mercury at the 29th degree here. A Fine Madness. That is the name of the movie, A Fine Madness. And I wonder if I get the trailer here. God, I hope I don't get dinged. Hold on. Let me see if I do this. So in this movie, Sean Connery, to me, this is maybe what they'll just do to make me cut out this part. I'm going to play this, okay? So I'm going to read you here. Let's see. This is, to me, this is the 29th degree of I'm going to come back to his chart. I just got to go here. Okay. Here we go. This is the 29th degree of Virgo. This is, I'm going to get the sound. Hold on. I got to get the sound. This is, stop the share. This is, to me, cinematically, this is how it is addressed. All right. Here we go. So, genius, poet, and carpet cleaner, Samson Shillito. Sean Connery has writer's block, and he can't bluster, clobber, or curse it away. But just watch him take Manhattan by storm. Try it in this whirlwind comedy. So he starts to go see a therapist because he's in this writer's block, right? And what happens, he's a poet, and how he tries to get back in touch with his ability to write, I think really typifies that 29th degree, that Taurian sort of decan of Virgo. Check this out.
Achtung, Achtung. So, today it is madness. That's the subject on the the agenda. Madness, yeah. And have we got a madness for you? Hoo, hoo, hoo. Such a madness like you have never seen. We call it a fine madness. The subject's name is Sean Connery. He got it from Russia with, you know. Then they gave him the golden finger. After that, he had a ball. The thunder of applause, all that jazz. No wonder this cookie cracked. Now it's got to be he should attack the deadliest foe of mankind since the beginning of time. Girls. Yes, in his new movie, Sean Connery pulls a switch. He hits girls. You think that isn't some crazy guy? Of course it is easier. But let us scientifically analyze this here nutcake. Now, here is a basic man, abstracted and stripped of sentimentality. Open his lid, and what do we find? A regular Geplatschuler vom Ispingen, dein Helve Scholgedungen. Or, as you might say in layman's language, one holy mess. It's what you call megalosychosis adumbrating a convolution of complexes. Our subject is distinguished by strong antisocial tendencies. No wonder he goes around hitting girls. The wonder is they don't hit back. No, they don't hit back. Not with their fists. They, what you call, sublimate their reactions in the most verdammte, underhanded ways. Some are screamers. Some call the fire department.
Don't you hit her! Stop it, or I'll call the police!
Such a brain works. Put on his headed. Rhoda!
Some get their father substitutes to do the dirty work. But worst of all are the sneakies. They creep up on him when he isn't even expecting. There's nothing they won't do. There's simply no end to their devilish ingenuity. Of course, he's sensible and civilized with men.
I'm pretty good at karate. Oh, you would be.
Come on, Wes, give me my dough.
But he's still hard on women. They even get the police after him. Sean Connery, Joanne Woodward, Gene Seberg, Patrick O'Neill, Colleen Dewhurst. Is he mad? You should have such a madness. A fine madness.
Bet you didn't know that Sean Connery film, did you? The heading stuff probably wouldn't go over too well today, right? But that's what I'm talking about. That's at like that 29th degree in Mercury in that Tauran decan. It's like, you know, it's visceral, it's instinctual, and there's a cinematic portrayal of that. You know, it's like it's you know, his head is like a bull, right? He's you know, and he's trying to break through so he can get through his writer's block. So let's go back to, you know, pretty interesting, I think, kind of, you know, little mundane correlation there. What do you got? What do you guys think about that? Gene Seberg, yep, absolutely. That was wild, right? Totally. I have no idea what's going on. Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, it's an interesting film, and if you get past the punch into the women stuff, it's actually kind of funny in some ways. Let's see what else we have here. It's interesting, isn't how the energy affects us. Let's see what else we have. Works in my writer's block every time. Oh, that's hilarious. That's hilarious, Steve. Good deal. Good deal. Anyway, I just wanted to show you sort of that in action in a little known Sean Connery film. Let's get back to his chart. A fine madness, yes. So occasionally Mercury, the Mercury square, which would be to Saturn, could be difficulty learning and dealing with the idea that the person may see themselves not always as perhaps smart as the rest of the world might see them. Saturn on the ascendant here in Connery's chart. And you always took him fucking seriously, didn't you? No matter what. I mean, even if it was a comedy like that, I mean, you know, you always kind of took him seriously. Watched a few Dave Letterman episodes, times he's on Letterman twice. And Letterman just had this kind of, you know, reverence and respect. I think it's Saturn. You know, it's Saturn. And the Saturn square Uranus is actually an interesting aspect because it's an aspect that doesn't really do well with authority. You know, the individual's trying to work out their own relationship with authority. And I don't think Sean Connery took shit from anybody. And I think that he was knighted. He was knighted. I think he was knighted in Scotland, if I'm not mistaken. But he wasn't real big on the British. He wasn't necessarily a fan of the British since he was a Scottish national. He lived life clearly on his own terms. True note in Aries, obviously. I mean, he's going to come across as being virile, macho. And even later on, he had an interview with Barbara Walters, and Barbara Walters, you know, she asked him about one time where he said that he would slap a woman, right? And she got kind of in his face about it. And she said, "Do you still believe that?" And he said, "Well, yes, I do." And she said, well, why is that? He says, "Well, because, you know, there are times when a woman does not know when to stop. And you can be very cordial and kind, and you want to give them the last word, but they want to keep going. They want to keep going. They want to keep going. And that's usually when they deserve a slap." And Barbara Walters didn't know what to say to it, right? And, you know, again, this is why there will never be people like Sean Connery. For better or worse, you may think that that's a deplorable or detestable statement, but the fact of the matter is that he made it and he didn't apologize for it, and made Barbara Walters, you know, fairly uncomfortable with it. You won't see that again. We live in a cancel/apologize culture, and this guy didn't apologize for anything. And as far as I know, as far as I can tell, he was outside of, you know, what we call the pedo rings. I don't think Sean Connery had anything to do with that world, by the way. He had a lot of really interesting placements in the 8th house. You know, he had Venus here in Libra, which obviously I think helped with his aesthetics, right? I mean, people have Venus in Libra or some strong Libra aspects tend to be attractive or have some kind of aesthetic value. But I don't think he really liked it all that much, right? He was, I think, much more comfortable with sort of this Aries side of his nature. But when we think about things like spies and surveillance, you know, the 8th house is one of those houses that really fits into that niche, you know, secret, hidden, tucked away, behind the scenes, dealing with other people's secrets, right? So even though he played a spy in movies, who knows? Maybe he was a spy in real life. But, you know, even though he was a spy in movies, clearly he had the astrological goods to put it to use. Like, it worked. It transferred to the screen. And even the Sun conjunction here with Neptune, which could make him quite mysterious in some ways and kind of deep and profound in a lot of ways as well, also creates a sense of mystery with Neptune moving into the 8th house. And when we get into spycraft, of course, Mars and Gemini are very much associated with the idea of having two realities. You know, we knew Sean Connery, but we also knew him as James Bond. He did many other roles, but that's the one I think that we'll always, you know him as, right? The sort of the duality of Sean Connery. He'll always be James Bond. And here we have Mars in Gemini in the 6th house. And again, I think Mars in the 6th house is quite good for, you know, kind of everyday work. And I think Sean Connery kind of went about his craft in that way. And we have the trine sextile of the Sun, which is a lot of vitality. and the sextile to Neptune, which again is creative. But Gemini, represents duality. And again, we get into Gemini. It's one of those signs that's associated with spycraft. And we can see the devotion here with the Pluto-Jupiter conjunction. And here's Pallas in the 7th house. And he was married to the same woman for a number of years. And you never read any gossip about Sean Connery, having extra male. I mean, who knows? Maybe they had, I don't know. But to me, this would be deep devotion. And, once he, married somebody, that there would be probably a very strong bond, especially with the Venus square to Pluto, And I don't know if he had any kids or not. I don't know that part of his life. But this is not necessarily an easy chart. This is a chart that's got some, some difficulties associated with it. Sort of channeling, Mars and Jupiter through that ascendant and Saturn is not always easy. But I think once the person understands how the operating system works, and that's really what astrology is, and that's what life is. When you understand what your operating system is, then you can do things like, figuring out, this Pluto-Jupiter opposition, this Mars opposition to Saturn. And it becomes a focal point through Saturn to the ascendant. And here we see everything sort of on the back end, right? It's really on the back end here, really Jupiter and Mars. So the idea is dealing with those kinds of intense forces, and then bringing them right into the the prismatic sort of or the sort of the laser-like focus through that first house. And it's always lurking, so in the background, right? There are always sort of background programs in the opposition. So there was always a sense of kind of menace with Mars hiding out there behind Saturn. Always a sense with Jupiter of maybe something more. It's like, okay, we can see him. He's kind of intense. He's kind of gruff, and he's got some real sort of defined characteristics. But there's something over here, right? There's something bigger. There's something that you want to find out about. Who is he? What's behind the guy? What's really sort of percolating over here? And the other opposition is Venus-Uranus. And I think probably until he met his wife, that might have been kind of a wild combination, the Venus-Uranus opposition. And not wanting to be, pegged into, being with any one person for a period of time. But I think that obviously that does happen. And he's got a south node here in the 9th house. And it's interesting that he would meet a woman from another country. And that's fascinating, because that would be relationship and partnership in the 9th house. So he made it work out. He definitely made it work out somehow. And maybe it was that Pluto square and that kind of intensity to commitment. And maybe that's what allowed for that interesting kind of conjunction to take place. The other thing too, and I've seen this with the South Node, when planets are around the South Node, you have to take into account, because when we think of the South Node, we think of past life in some ways. We've been there, done that. So in this lifetime, Sean Connery is going to be, an Aries. He's going to be an Aries. He's got that Aries energy he's got to express. He's got Uranus in Aries. And there's a very wide conjunction if you want to play on those terms. But we know him. And when we think of Sean Connery, we think of the badass, right? And whatever role he played, even when he played an aging, who's it? Was it Arthur? Lion in Winter, when he played the king, Lion in Winter. See, he still had a little bit of an edge or a menace to him, even though he was the Lion in Winter. But here, when we see the South Node, whatever planets are around the South Node, to me, that represents unfinished business. Like you just can't isolate the South Node and say, okay, I'm really not going to put a lot of energy into that aspect into this lifetime. And I've seen this again and again with charts. I mean, you got to look at it and say, well, what does this mean? If the idea is to focalize the energy here, which is really the idea, and you have the opposite side over here, or the the opposition here, and there's something around it, there's usually something unfinished. Something unfinished. And to me, this would be the relationship, right? The relationship aspect in the ninth house, in clearly a very exotic place like Morocco, where he winds up meeting his wife, which he's with until the day he passes. So for me, it's almost like he went there. And it's also interesting because a man who would be king, it's really about another time period. So it's almost like he picks up on this this thread, right? This thread through a period piece, and then through that period, he meets the woman that he would marry, and then resolves in a lot of ways the Venus South Node conjunction through partnership. Scorpio on the midheaven, so he's a transformer, and I think Sean Connery really was instrumental in creating what we would call the spy genre, although it was already coming into play during that time. And I gave you two examples of that. We had Secret Agent Man, and we also had The Saint, played by Roger Moore. And of course, we could talk about things like, MI5, Tavistock, and this idea that they would inculcate people into this kind of narrative about spying, about intelligence apparatuses, that it would be sort of hidden in plain sight in a lot of ways. Michael Caine got into this too with some of his movies, like the Ipcris File and things like that. And of course, The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and all these other things that became very, very popular. And I think a lot of that had to do with what was happening also astrologically with Neptune in Scorpio during that time, right? So Neptune is cinema and Scorpio is behind the scenes. And again, talking about secrets and things that are hidden. So, we had a lot of spycraft cinema with Neptune and Scorpio. We also had a lot of occult cinema. Rosemary's Baby happens during Neptune in Scorpio, which opens up a wholly different genre, right? That's Neptune and Scorpio happens during that time. I think there's some other films that we get into some of the heavy drug movies, some of the druggy films start to come out with Neptune and Scorpio. Easy Rider and some of those American international movie flicks. The Trip, I think it was the Trip with Peter Fonda, directed by Jack Nicholson. So we're starting to get into that Neptune and Scorpio kind of cinematic portrayal. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to look at what were the aspects when Dr. No hit Connery, right? When Dr. No opens up, what was going on, right? So let's see what we have here. So Dr. No was released in two phases. One, it was released in, let's see. I have it here. One was, it was released in England, and that was on October. So I have it. Yeah. Sean Connery. Which one is this? Yes. There. Trying to bleed off right off the edge of my screen. Bleeding right off the edge. So this is the English release of Dr. No, the first Sean Connery movie. And we're going to put it up against this chart. And we're going to see what was happening right there. Okay. So the thing that I think really jumps out, and especially when you look at it with the release that'll take place in the United States in May, is Uranus right around his sun. So he's going to go through a pretty significant life change. Pluto, really not far away from the sun, much closer when the casting started, right? And closer when there was the filming taking place. But Uranus is really the player here. So there's going to be a radical change in Sean Connery's life, right? He's going to wind up being pretty much a different person, after this film debuts. So we have that. I think that's really sort of the news of the day here with the release of the film. we also have Mars, which is transiting through his seventh house. And some of the reviews were not all that favorable. And yet, at the same time, there were enough favorables. The more favorable reviews, I think, come from the United States, actually. And we'll look at the October chart or the October release chart. So this is part of a two-phase process. And if it wasn't successful enough in England during that time, then I'm not sure they would have really gone hardcore with the U.S. release. But we see Uranus making a big play in the chart and really changing, his life and his identity. Pallas is here. We're going to talk about Pallas. We're going to talk about pattern recognition on Jupiter. And I think what this is doing is it's setting up like a field of attraction. And today I was looking up the Nigella Lawson's biography, who's born January 8th. So she's born on David Bowie's birthday, actually. And it was interesting because Nigella Lawson had, when she was really hot, right, she had an appeal with both women and men. And the appeal was that women wanted to be like her and men wanted to be with her. And I think Sean Connery has that same appeal in that men want to be like him and women want to be with him. And I feel like the release of Dr. No sort of sets that up, right? We have with Mars in the seventh house and this kind of this virility, the relationship to the man, right? And then we have Pallas here with Jupiter and a pattern of perhaps more expansion. Like there could be more of this. There could be more of these opportunities really coming down the line. Jupiter is in his second house, so this is going to be opportunity for him to make money. And now we see Jupiter in sextile with Saturn and pretty close in terms of the sextile, which means hard work pays off with opportunity, finances, resources in the sign of Pisces, which of course is related to film. Okay, Venus right here on the midheaven making its announcement. So this is actually really fortuitous for Connery that the film is introduced during this day and with Venus on the midheaven. So this is nice. This again sets up this idea of attraction and to some degree kind of ease, right? Ease. Things get easy with Venus. And I think this is a good start in terms of for Connery, right? I really feel like it's the Uranus-Sun conjunction, which is really the game changer. Like Dr. No is going to change his life. Okay, so the next phase of this is going to be here with the U.S. release, which happens in October. So we're going to take a quick look at that. And then we're going to look at the elements in his chart for when he passed away. Okay, so this is going to be for May in the U.S. And we're going to do that right there. So it's released on May 8th, 1963. I'm sure like New York City and probably around 7 p.m. Let's just that's when most of the crowds are going to probably show up. So again, Uranus has gone retrograde. You can see where it's gone retrograde, and it's even closer to his sun. So again, he's still in this process of kind of radically being kind of made over. Like his life is changing in a big way here. Now Mars has transited from Cancer to the sign of Leo. So we have Mars in Leo and conjunct Ceres and getting, starting to get within orb of his sun, but not quite. But this is, again, kind of more kind of virility and, sort of kind of more masculine energy in Leo. And what started here with Pallas conjuncting Jupiter, now sort of consummates with the true node conjunct his natal Pallas. So here's where I think he really begins to see the pattern that's going to unfold for him. And he's got a Pallas-Pluto conjunction in his chart. That's very intense. And to me, that's usually somebody who has tremendous instincts, really tremendous instincts. And I think he chose most of the right roles all the time. Although some people think that Zardoz was a bad career move. I know. But here's where I think it really kind of breaks. He really breaks through the U.S. because we have the moon, and this is just for, this day, right, on May 8th, 1963. And here's the moon right here. This would probably be around the 7 p.m. show in New York City. And it's playing somewhere at 7 p.m. in New York City. And the moon is right on the midheaven at that time. And it's in Scorpio. So there's a lot of intrigue. And again, we're in this genre, the spy genre, which is really going to be ruled by Neptune and Scorpio. And here we have Neptune and the moon together in Scorpio, right on Sean Connery's midheaven. So, I would say that this is the christening of the spy genre in cinema and television. And, there had been detective series, but they were kind of all pretty fucking boring. Peter Gunn was okay. But this is where it all takes off, right? From Sean Connery to Dean Martin as Matt, what's his name? I don't want to say Matt Flynn. That's him, like Flynn. I'm having a moment. Matt. Anyway, Dean Martin played Matt. It'll come to me. And it was like, the least favorite of my spy genre movies. It's like, it's too satirical. I never took Dean Martin seriously as an actor. Sons of Katie Elder. He's trying to play a cowboy. It's not hitting for me. But, James Coburn in like Flynn, another spy genre film, a bit spoofy and satirical, but it works, right? It works. I don't know why it works for The Wrecking Crew was, I think, the name of the movie. I don't know why it worked for James Coburn and not Dean Martin. But we've got Robert Vaughn. Man, the spy genre just blows up here, and we can really see kind of the genesis of it. It's right there on Sean Connery's chart. Bang on. Totally bang on. Venus-Uranus conjunction here. Remember, we saw Venus all the way up at the top of the chart here in England, and it's not quite in the third house here, but it's transiting Uranus. So he's got a Uranus-Sun conjunction, Uranus-Neptune conjunction as well, and then Venus-Uranus conjunction, and everything happens very quickly from this point forward with Sean Connery. Sun conjunct the IC, and I think there would be even a time when I think he actually had a house in Los Angeles, I think, if I'm not mistaken. He had a place in LA or New York. So he had a home here, ultimately. And, I feel like the game changer for him personally is that Uranus-Sun conjunction. And then here we see the birth of the spy genre right there. Boom. Okay. So let's take a look at just his chart in passing real fast. So what was happening? So I just did it for now, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So we're just going to look at this. And so these are where the transits were. And we can see that he's in the Pluto-Pluto opposition. And I've talked about the Pluto-Pluto opposition before. And if you make it through the Pluto-Pluto opposition, there's a pretty good chance you'll live into your 100s. And a lot of people don't make it through the Pluto-Pluto opposition. And, our friend, not really a friend, but or a theoretical friend, Sean Connery, didn't do it, right? Didn't do it. Pluto here is at 23. Pluto here is at 20, sort of, but it's retrograding. Doesn't really quite make it through the opposition. I think Pluto goes back to 22 or 21, almost, but not quite. I'd say, clearing that 5-degree orb would probably qualify. So this is really kind of the big cutoff date for a lot of people, or at least it seems to be. And when they get past it, they tend to live a long time. Like Margaret Thatcher lived into her 90s. The Queen is like in her 90s. I think Clint Eastwood's got through the Pluto-Pluto opposition, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, Clint Eastwood could live another 10 years. But Sean Connery did not make it. I mean, so, are we looking for some kind of indicator of mortality? I think the Pluto-Pluto opposition clearly at this stage of the game is one of them. I don't know what he passed away from, but he had Mars on Uranus, right? Which I think is fitting in a lot of ways, you know, that the light was snuffed out, and a particular kind of light, you know, a very Aries kind of light, a very kind of virile, macho, telling Barbara Walters, you know, why he slaps women, kind of like it's over, you know, and like that, and quick. Mars retrograde here. What else do we have? Is there anything else really jumping out of me? So let's see. It was the Saturday night with the moon was in Taurus, but probably closer to Chiron. So, you know, the Taurus moon opposite his midheaven. That's interesting. Quite possibly, you know, dealing with Taurus again, and Scorpio on the midheaven. Venus transiting his 8th house. I really feel like, just in terms of for his chart, it really comes down to, I think, Pluto opposition. I mean, I think that's it. That's one of those astrological gateways. You pass through, you're good for probably another decade. It's not written in stone, but I've seen this quite a bit. He didn't quite make it through. You know, he did not quite make it through. Not quite there. I think that's it. I think that's about it for the astrological forensics on that thing. Plain and simple. He hit the Pluto opposition wall. And c'est la vie. C'est la vie. An interesting life, an interesting character, and a giant. True giant, and one that I think will be not seen again for quite some time. All right, what do you guys think? What do you guys think? Good vibes. Who the hell gets tested? You guys are going on to 2020. Everybody's lined to vote. You guys get your own thing going on. Sorry, it was just my pain to Sean Connery. All right, we can move on. Let's go. Here we go. Let me put me back in here. All right. And do this. Yeah, he had it, man. Sean Connery had it all the way up till his. You want to see something weird? Before I leave Sean Connery, you want to see something weird? This is why I said that. Well, maybe he could have been a spy. I'll show you guys some. You guys must have seen this at some point. If not, let me show you. I don't know if you guys have seen this before, but it's kind of worth checking out in some ways. Kind of worth checking out. Now, we know that actors play different roles. Right? They play different roles. Oh, yeah, here's Stanley Kubrick as Salman Rushdie. It's kind of interesting. Right? Now, what's going on with the ears? Do they have the same ears? I don't think they're the same person. But it's interesting, right? And Connery, you know, there were periods of time where he ducked out. There were periods where we didn't see where Sean Connery actually went. I don't think he was the Ayatollah Khomeini, but it's certainly interesting to think about and ponder, especially knowing that he was involved in the cinematic art of spycraft. There we go. A little bit of twinning and doubling. Okay, so I wanted to talk about Pallas Athena, because it gets into our discussion for where we're going. And I had a page all set up for Pallas here. So if you don't know what Pallas looks like in a chart, I'm just going to go back. I'll show you. We're going to get into Trump and election night. So I'm going to show you visually what Pallas looks like. It's right there. It's Pallas. See that? Right there. Okay, so that's the symbol for Pallas Athena. And of the asteroids, it tends to be the sort of the third in the progression of the asteroids, the first being the youngest, Juno, innocence, fertility, newness, springtime. Then we move into Ceres. Ceres being the nurturer, right? The rain goddess. You have, once you become impregnated, Juno, Ceres says child, right? Feed child, feed family. And then Pallas is the next. Pallas is the sort of the royal consort, right? Pallas has been sort of archetypally related to, say, Hera, the consort of Zeus, Queen of Heaven, who basically tells Zeus what the fuck is going on. It's like, have you seen this? Have you seen this? Have you seen this? As Zeus consults with Hera. So Hera has the ability to pattern recognize, see what's happening. And it takes a little while to get to that pattern recognition phase. You need a little bit of practice. You need a little bit of seasoning, a little bit of wind under your wings. And then finally, we have Vesta, which is the final the final asteroid, which is the Vestal Virgin, which is old, right? It's not young. It's old. The Vestal Virgin is old. It's crone-like, but still virginal in some regards, but lit within from the. It's illuminated from within. There's like this light, this lamp with Vesta. So Pallas, which is what we're talking about, has to do with things like pattern recognition. And the reason why here, let me show you another visual Pallas here. I'm just going to jump into quickly, just, astrology.com. This is an article written by Rebecca Farrar. I just wanted to show you guys just a visual, give her some credit here. I think it's a pretty good summation of Pallas right here. Goddess of war, victory, craft, and wisdom. Athena is one of the most important figures in Greece, sometimes referred to with surnames Pallas Athena. She's said to have been born from her father Zeus' head in full armor. Her birth represents a strong identification as daddy's girl and a warrior. Athena was also considered patroness for heroes of ancient times, as Hercules and wore Medusa's head on her breastplate after helping Perseus kill her, though that's a myth for another time. So I just wanted to drop down. And these are some interesting aspects with Pallas. Astrological Pallas, or Pallas Athena, was the second asteroid discovered, 1802. Third largest side, while Mercury and other planets get a lot of attention for their retrograde. Pallas Athena, like other asteroids, often gets left out. From May 17th until September 25th, the asteroid begins its 4-month annual movement backwards from 0 degrees Aquarius, next to Saturn, to 12 degrees Capricorn. Collectively, this cosmic movement provokes us to examine our beliefs and balance polarities of thought to include information and logic aligned with intuition or wisdom itself. Pallas's gifts allow us to notice patterns in larger pictures, helpful for creativity and problem solving. In natal charts, this larger vision zooms in on our curiosity and highlights our own unique version of genius. For this reason, it can be associated with learning, teaching, and writing, though when out of balance, they become prone to black and white thinking, a bit of a know-it-all attitude similar to Mercury. I think Mercury's being a little more blank, canvassy. Okay. So there are a few things to, these are just some keyword stuff here. Pallas Athena and Aries, an aspect of Mars, cognizance occurs through action, momentum, desire to initiate inspiration through thinking. With Taurus, or an aspect of Venus, perception, sensuality, beauty, and thoughts. So you're looking for pattern recognition here. With Gemini and Mercury, you're dealing with paradox, intellectuality versus intuition, or sometimes combining the two. Pallas in aspect with Cancer of the Moon, feelings of emotion attuned to how one can observe through basic needs and empathy. Again, setting up pattern recognition through that spectrum. With Leo, it's creative intelligence, self-expression, and finding patterns or ways in which you can reaffirm that and express that further and deeper. This is with Mercury and Pallas, Virgo, Pallas aspects, modalities of language, spoken, written, et cetera, et cetera. So Pallas has connections to all these different kinds of modalities, right? So with Libra here, or with Venus, it's a bridge between the complementary hemispheres of the mind, pathway to balance. In Scorpio, it's a way of seeing, between the lines, underneath layers, what may be hidden from the light of truth. Again, deep pattern recognition there. And with Sagittarius or Jupiter, pointing towards large-scale vision, the lens of morality and ideals. Through Capricorn and Saturn, ability to make things real through awareness of their manifestation, where sight meets stability. Pallas Athena and Aquarius, or an aspect to Uranus, awareness comes with sight into the future, prophetic or energetic frequency. And then with Neptune here in Pisces, allows for observing beyond the physical realm and into a channel of the ethereal. Now, one of the other things that's associated with Pallas is telepathy, okay? Telepathy in the pituitary gland. So one of the things that is connected with Pallas is usually that an individual winds up becoming perhaps a bit more psychic or telepathic after the age of 30. Like Pallas can really kick in then. So Pallas is great, and I think it's one of the aspects with astrology and the asteroids that I really love to work with the most. I have it conjunct Saturn in my chart, so it plays a pretty big role in my chart, 11-11. And so I like to work with it as a tool, and work with it as a tool in astrology, because astrology has a lot to do with pattern recognition, especially on a mundane level. So, I encourage you to, search out Pallas in your chart and kind of, discover, where it is and what sign it's in, and begin to play around with that, because it gives you kind of an interesting, blueprint or niche in which you can see how your ability to perceive patterns and recognize them can actually play a creative role in your life. So there's a reason I'm bringing this up, and it has to do with where we are with the election cycle. And more than just the election cycle, it has to deal with where we are with the reality cycle. So one of the things that I noticed was that, we've been dealing with this incredible amount of social strife. And it really kicked in when, right after the George Floyd event, which was on May 25th. And it really hasn't abated. I mean, it's always been part of the background script, and there'll be somebody who will, do something crazy like run around with a sword in Philadelphia and then get smoked, and all of a sudden you have Philadelphia's on fire. And, there were a couple of moments where I really felt like things were going to go off the rails. It really felt like 4th of July, based on all the momentum that had happened. All the momentum. If there was going to be a moment in time where there was going to be, really massive flag burning, and there were all these fireworks that have been, basically stolen, and they were being fired in places like Portland and all over the place. I mean, fireworks as weapons. And it really felt like 4th of July was going to go off the rails. So this was it, that these forces were going to invert 4th of July and really go after it, really get it. You know what? That didn't happen. Some of it happened. There were some things that happened on 4th of July. There was some stuff that went down, but it wasn't huge. It wasn't huge. It wasn't like I thought it would be. I'm like, okay, this is interesting. This is very interesting. So now let's go back to last week. Let's get into Wednesday and Thursday. Shit is going off in Philadelphia, right? Those are the guys that was a Walter Wallace or something like that, this guy. Anyway, shit is going off. I mean, cars are burning. They're looting like crazy. City of brotherly love, theoretically. Home of the American Revolution. First capital of the United States. And I'm thinking, this is it, man. This is the flashpoint. This is where they're really trying to start the tinderbox and get it going. And then that energy is going to move into Halloween. And that radicalized kind of, Moon Uranus conjunction on Halloween was just kind of light everything up. You know what? That didn't happen either. Like Halloween, thank God, was not like a scary thing. Like I really felt like the energy just getting cranked up, especially with that precursor in Philadelphia. That was the kindling. Something happened. And something happened on July 4th, and something happened on Halloween. And they could have been a hell of a lot worse. Hell of a lot worse. Now, that doesn't mean that there wasn't things happening around the world. Like you go into Italy, or Italy's going nuts, man. I mean, they're going fucking nuts. They're like, they have had it with the lockdown shit in Italy. That's all pre-full moon, right? That stuff was going on all week. I've seen footage of that, but I'm wondering how much more people can really take. I'm wondering how much more people in England who are coming around again. Now we got this next wave. All the EU is getting into heavy-duty lockdown phase now. Okay, so the actual kind of splitting of the emotional atom didn't occur on Saturday night. Thank God it didn't. But there's a pattern now, right? There's a pattern. So what can we derive from this? What's going to happen on election night? Now, I've looked at that chart for a long time. For a long time, I've thought this is not a great chart. I remember the first time I saw it was really about 2 years ago when I started looking at it. I was thinking, this is not a great chart. And everything that has been the prelude to November 3rd has been absolutely and utterly flammable, okay? And it adds into the potentiality of this kinetic, everything kind of going kinetic on election night. And remember, Mercury's stationary on election night, which is, I think, almost unheard of. So the idea, right, you look at that chart, and I'll pop it up. I'll pop it up to Trump's chart in a minute. But the idea with that chart, which is really just kind of unforgiving, and especially with this intense polarization that's been taking place, it's just a time bomb waiting to go off. But we didn't see it on 4th of July, and we didn't see it on Halloween. Will we see it on election night? This is the thing, and everybody's been talking about this, myself included, because the momentum has been building towards this kind of this sort of this Maginot line. The election night would be this line that we would cross, and things would be different forever in this country and maybe the world. And I think we've all been sort of conditioned to think that it's going to go down a certain way. And based on this pattern recognition, this idea that we can see things as they begin to unfold, maybe it's not going to happen that way. Maybe it's going to be something very, very different. Because we all think that the Democrats are going to run this thing out, and they're not going to be able to, they're not going to be able to win, so they're going to want to steal the election. I mean, that's certainly been the common thought. And they've talked about seceding and, and just running this thing out, running the clock out until January 20th, and Trump's got to move out. In the meantime, violence, Antifa, Black Lives Matter, sleeper cells all hitting the streets, people buying ammo like crazy, people buying preps, a lot of kind of high tension wire stuff, a lot of fear, people really kind of on edge. What if nothing happens? What if nothing happens? And I'm being absolutely serious about this now, because there have been two flashpoints that, again, based on number one, sort of the not only the astrology, but the momentum, both nights, July 4th and October 31st, should have been real firecrackers. And thank God they weren't. Some shit went down on July 4th, but it wasn't super heavy duty. It wasn't super heavy duty. So I'm going to lay out a scenario, an election night scenario. What if, and I do think we're going to look at Trump and the whole thing, but what if Trump wins soundly? And I believe he will. I believe this is, you look at his chart, this is not a chart that loses elections. This is it. He's at his peak right now, okay? In a fair election, there's no way Joe Biden beats him in a fair election. No matter what you think of politics, no matter what you think of the electoral process, no matter what you think of any of it, if you're playing the astrological game with Trump, there's no way Biden beats him astrologically in a fair election, okay? So let's just say for a moment that Trump is far enough ahead and he wins. And we all think that it's going to be hell, that Biden's going to contest this thing, and that they're going to try to run the clock out. I think the thing that people have not been talking about, which based on these patterns that we've seen, is that at a certain point during election night, Biden might just concede. And that's it. And that's it, right? It's over. It's over. Like, Trump has a big enough lead and he concedes. And we've heard that they won't. We've heard that they won't, and that the country will be thrown into chaos for weeks. But looking at the patterns, this would be the third major night that things were supposed to go kinetic. Like I said, some of it happened on July 4th, not a ton. Again, not here in this country, in Italy, but it's been on for a while. The 4th of July with all an intense blue moon, Uranus conjunction of the moon energy opposite the sun. This would fit the pattern. And it would be incredibly anticlimactic, really anticlimactic. And if you're on the left and you're a Biden supporter and that happens, what is going to happen at that point? I'll tell you what will happen at that point. It takes the air out of the balloon. It takes the air right out of the balloon. Now, there are two things that I think are really pertinent to the pattern. And I'm not even talking about astrology. But there are two things. One of them could be astrological. Number one, ABC broke the silence. And they began to talk about Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. They broke the silence. There was an ABC News story on this, which I think is significant. It's the first of the major networks, besides Fox, that broke the story. It's like, wow, that's interesting. And they're all Intel networks, but of all three of them, ABC might be the most Intel of all the Intel networks, right? Because what do we think of when we hear ABC? We think of the alphabet, right? The alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And when we think of the initials, we call them the alphabet agencies. And ABC has always long been associated, probably the most, with the alphabet agency, CIA, really. because they want to do a lot of like youth programming. Like the ABC was always connected to youth programming. CBS was geared towards older audiences. NBC was kind of somewhere in between, but NBC was, more sort of the news arm of everything. But ABC was always about youth culture. You always had youth shows popping on ABC, like Room 222, The Mod Squad. It was very big. I think American Bandstand was on ABC as well. So they were using ABC as kind of a big channel to get into the minds of the youth in a lot of ways. It's always been that way. So they broke it. They were breaking the Biden story, which is interesting. The other thing that to me says that it's probably not going to be as intense as we might perceive it to be or have foreshadowed to be, is that Walmart 2 days ago, was it Wednesday? It was Wednesday. Walmart pulled all their ammo, which isn't much. I mean, Walmart's like, if you go to a Walmart, you go to the gun section in a Walmart. I mean, what are you getting? You're getting, if you're lucky, fucking turkey load, 10 and 12 and 20 gauge shotgun. You might get some, 243, hunting ammo, single bolt hunting ammo. And, maybe a few off calibers, rifles. Get a 10 gauge, 12 gauge. You might get a lever action, 30-06 there. Make it a few 22s, and that's really it, man. You won't get any semi-automatics at Walmart. They don't sell handguns anymore. So Walmart just said, we're not going to get in the gun. We're not going to be in the gun business. And so they took all their guns and all their ammo off the shelves on Wednesday, but then they put them back. I'm like, well, that's interesting. Why did they put the guns and the ammo back? And I think because, Walmart is so deeply tied into the military-industrial complex, and they're so tied into that whole kind of, FEMA camp distribution point network, that I think that they got the message that it's not going to be as bad as they think it is. Okay, there's a couple of reasons why. Number one, I have a feeling that Biden will concede. That's what I think. And it'll pull the air out of everything. And I mean everything. And it will deflate if Biden doesn't concede and they go into the contesting of the vote and they hire all these lawyers and all the shit that they've done, which is still a possibility, by the way. It's still a possibility. But that's what everybody's expecting. And we're in a period, in a phase where what we expect is not always what's going to happen. Like, we're really in a time where things flip, and we can still see patterns and we still see things on the horizon. And astrology is quite helpful for that, by the way. But it's been interesting to watch these kind of flashpoint moments, one sort of happen and the other really. And here's why. Because I feel like the chaos is controlled chaos. Like there are orders to hit the streets. There are clear orders to hit the streets. And those orders could be put into place on election night as well. Like, these people just don't go out and have these kinds of, kind of organic analog, I'm mad as hell, I'm not going to take it any more moments. No, there are insurrectionists that are fucking paid. Okay, they're paid, and they get top-down commands, and those top-down commands have interesting relationships, I think, with the intel and former intel sort of services and people that are in charge of those services, right? So if they decide to, let the dogs out, then the dogs will go out. They will go out. But I don't think Walmart would have put ammo in all their stores if that was going to happen. So I think, again, based on the pattern recognition, that what we think is going to happen on election night probably won't happen. Probably won't. This is just on pattern recognition. And that all of a sudden Biden concedes, steps away, Trump clear winner, and it's like a big fucking deal. But the left, who have been really hanging on to this, will be deflated. They'll be deflated. They'll take the air right out. Air right out. They won't be deflated if there is this consternation in the continuance of trying to, rig the vote, or you know what I mean. They'll continue to kind of foment the frustration and the bitterness, et cetera, et cetera. The other thing too is that there's no guarantee that Trump is going to be off the hook for anything. I mean, it could still be a full court press, which I think they love, right? They love that shit, And if somebody like Joe Biden was elected, CNN and MSNBC and NBC and CBS, the ratings will go. They'll go to hell. There'll be nothing to talk about. There'll be nothing to talk about. It'll be the most boring fucking presidency for those networks. At that point, all they'll do is just churn out and spit out propaganda. Nobody will watch it. Like, nobody watched the news in Russia. Nobody watched the news in Russia. They all knew the news was fake. They didn't care what the news was. It was all fake. Nobody watched the news in Russia. And that'll probably be what happens here. Nobody will watch the news. They watch it now because MSNBC and CNN have become these attack dogs for Trump. And people get their animus out through those networks. But if Biden's elected, that goes away. And nobody's going to watch. And maybe some people will watch Fox and Tucker Carlson, whatever. But those networks, which have been struggling for ratings, they'll fall flat. They'll just fall really, really flat. Do they really want that? I don't know. I don't think so. All right, so let's look at the election night chart. And I'm looking at it really for the Trump perspective here. I wanted to see what's happening here. All right. Here we go. Okay, so we have Donald John Trump on the inside. All right, so this is election night. Look at this. Moon conjunct Sun. That's about as synchronous as it gets. And here we have the true node conjunction. This is Donald Trump's peak. It's right here. This is it. This is his peak. Boom. Everything is in balance and alignment. Moon opposition. He's got Moon in Sagittarius down here, born on a lunar eclipse. So, I think Trump's Moon is probably the most vulnerable part of his chart. But here it's quite strong. We see the masculine and the feminine blending together, working together. Also, the Moon in this position represents the sort of mass psychology. And even though it's in Gemini, Trump is a very Cancerian or a very lunar candidate. And what I mean by that is that he has all these planets in Cancer. He has Mercury in Cancer, Saturn, Venus conjunction in Cancer. And he's got this ability to tap into the common people, right? I mean, this is the 11th house. This is where the silent majority live, or just the common folk, man. He speaks in a language that resonates with the vox populi. It's not articulate. It's not necessarily polished. You're not going to hear, William F. Buckley's, his sort of clipped upper middle class, upper class kind of Yale sort of, droll and dry accent. You're not going to hear that with Trump. You're not going to hear when Obama was kind of on and he had the teleprompter in front of him. You're not going to hear that. Obama could be very polished, very articulate, perfect timing. Get him outside of his comfort zone with his teleprompter, and my God, he was a stammering mess. And Trump is not like that. He's never been like that. He's always, had that kind of New Yorker, sort of gruff, tough, hey, look at me, I was born in Jamaica, New York, kind of accent. And to this day, he carries that. So, that's very much Cancerian in a lot of ways. It's kind of a populist note. And here we have the moon right on top of the sun. Again, it's kind of this populist sort of signifier, and also really connecting in with this, the mass psychology. Again, in a normal election, to me, this chart is a slam fucking election night dunk. Could there be foul play? Could there be, irregularities? Sure. But again, based on the pattern recognition, I just think that I think that it may be a lot more anticlimactic than people are predicting. And I've been looking at this for a while, just thinking, man, this election night chart it's rough. When I first saw it, I was like, it's rough. And I knew Trump has the chart. He's got the chart for that moment in time. He's got it. But we've seen the shenanigans, and we've seen the background noise. We've seen it. But I just get a sense it's going to be less climactic. And I hope I'm right. I really hope I'm right. Number one, I'll look pretty good. And number two, I think it'll be much better for the country. I think much better for the country to not have to go through just, more of this, strife and on the streets and blood and violence and hell. But, where does all that energy and where does all that angst go away? I'm not sure it does. I'm just not sure it does. It's still going to be there, and we're still going to have to deal with it. But election night itself might be a bit more anticlimactic than we think. Okay? And again, one of the dead giveaways for me was Walmart putting all those guns and ammo. Again, that's not like a huge armory. They're not in the gun business really anymore. But they're there. And they were going to take them off the shelves for the election. And Walmart's connected. They're connected. They know shit. They totally know shit. The one thing that Trump did do, which I thought was unusual, is that he canceled his party at the hotel. Now, I do think that he probably didn't want to be on the streets just in case things got weird and people had to leave. Totally get it. Totally get it. All right. I'm going to put that question up to you guys. What do you think? What do you think is going to happen on election night? Is it going to be hell's bells, or is it going to be more anticlimactic, and that Joe Biden just sundowns that moment right into oblivion? What do you think? What do we got? Is there another force sort of indicate 2020 unrest stays volatile but relatively mild? Well, look, they've taken the genie out of the bottle, right? I mean, they're not going to be able to put it back. I still think there would be a lot of people who could be really angsty. 2021 doesn't look all that great astrologically either. But we do have the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction coming in on the 21st. And that might be a really interesting time to kind of get past a lot of these things. But I don't think a lot of people who have been riled up and programmed they're not going to walk it back anytime soon. I'm not sure how that's going to be resolved. I'm just not. I mean, again, would they want Trump in for another 2 to 3 years to have more conflict and more unrest? Sure, they would. Absolutely. To continue to chip away at the American fabric, to go after him again and more impeachment? Sure. That's not out of the question at all. and to really degrade this thing to a point where they can get somebody like AOC ready to become president in 2024, which she'll be eligible for. Would they want that? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Because again, if you're playing a long game, you're hoping that you get a lot of the, the 16, 17, 18-year-olds, to come on board and be able to, theoretically vote and, be ideologically in alignment, with the numbers at that time. Yeah. I mean, why wouldn't they continue to, so you have to remember that the Russian Revolution started in roughly 2013. Okay. It started kind of right at the end of the First World War, and it consummated in 2017. So right around, 4.5, almost 5 years. And this revolution that we're in now, and we are in a revolution now, in my estimation, really started right around 2016. It was beginning of the Purple Revolution. And it really didn't kick into about 2017. So we're really about 3 years into this thing. And, but I think they probably want the elements a bit more on their side if they want to flip the script and go into that version of, a kind of Chinese credit score, CCP style, Green New Deal paradigm reality. But I'm not sure the United States is there and ready for it. I don't think that this country is tameable to that extent right now. I don't. I really don't. And I think if Biden and Harris get in, they're going to have a hell of a time in their hands. Really a hell of a time in their hands. I think the right, the Republicans, and the people have been fired up. They're going to be more of a handful than maybe the left might be. I think the left will still be a handful, but not quite the same. Not after experiencing a defeat. And I think it would be much easier to deal with, say, Kamala Harris in the White House, and knowing that really that's the enemy, right? On some level, right? On some level, they can polarize. Like, this is a person who wants to do all this stuff, take away your guns and enforce, take meat away and all that shit, right? She'll fall right in alignment with Klaus Schwab and the Fourth Industrial Revolution. I think the more interesting question and the more interesting scenario is if Trump does win, like then what does happen? How do we respond to the Fourth Industrial Revolution? How do we respond to the World Economic Forum? How do we respond with the EU? How do we respond to things like China and the encroachment, the absolute encroachment of personal tyranny that's taking place and descending upon Western Europe and England and Australia and New Zealand? What happens? What happens after that? Well, we know that if Biden gets in and Harris gets in, it is a fait accompli, brothers and sisters. It is going to happen. It is going to happen. Babylon will fall. If Trump gets in, it may fall, but it will look very differently. And Trump, if Trump wants, here's what happened. I think Trump would have no problem with a globalized system if he's running the damn globalized system. I don't think Trump has any problem with globalism if he's out in front running it. Okay, that's my sense with Trump. If somebody else is running it, I don't think so. I really don't. And ultimately, do I think he's a globalist? I think Trump is somebody who's an opportunist. He's an opportunist. I do think he has some traditional values, though. One of the things that really crossed my path was, he got Marla Maples pregnant, and she didn't get an abortion. She did not get an abortion. Now, I don't know the full story of Donald Trump. Who knows? Maybe he's banged some women and they had to get an abortion. I don't know. But Marla Maples sure as hell didn't get an abortion. And he married her so the kid could be born in wedlock. And there are people who have said repeatedly that Trump is anti-abortion. He's not into it, right? So, so there's some very interesting kinds of traditional things that go along with, at times, a very untraditional person. To this day, to me, he's still the most enigmatic president I've ever seen. And it's that Sun-Uranus conjunction, and it's there. But again, if they wanted to, continue to run America down and completely and utterly, destroy it in some way, shape, or form, it may be more, how do I say this? Maybe more profound and deep and effective and negatively transformative if Trump is the president versus a Biden-Harris thing. I think Biden-Harris puts everybody on the balls of their feet. And if Trump wins, there's more of a sense of laxity and people saying, okay, it's over now. All right, it's over. The threat is vanquished. And that's really when things have to be clearly looked at, or you cannot fall asleep at that point. It's going to be, I'm telling you, it's going to be really interesting because we're going to have to deal with the whole COVID shit. Now they're going after Fauci again. They've turned on Fauci. There's real chaos in the COVID world now. It's going to be interesting. They keep talking about the vaccines, but the vaccines aren't close. I'm telling you, things aren't what they seem. And I'm kind of into it. I'm really kind of into it. I want to see what happens. Either way, like it's going to be off the map either way. And we're going to be in a new reality. And that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction is going to be very interesting on 21st. It's super conjunction. Are we going to all fall into place and own nothing and be freer and happier for it? Or is there going to be a pushback on Klaus Schwab and the Fourth Industrial Revolution, the Great Reset? Is there going to be a pushback on that? I sure as hell hope so, because the way it's looking, it's not going to be all that warm and fuzzy. And maybe really what they're doing is they're just doing us a favor. For those of humanity who've been on the edge and all of a sudden see this shit going down, it's like, the alarm is going off, okay? And if it's not, it really should be. So the alarm should really be going off in your head right now. And a lot of people are waking up. So they're doing us a big favor. This is the biggest wake-up call we've ever had. It is also the closest we've ever come to in my lifetime or any other lifetime to complete and utter dominance in global tyranny. On an Orwellian, Philip K. Dickian-like scale. This is it, man. I mean, we are really at the cusp. We are at the precipice. And we're either gonna cut through the Gordian knot and get through this thing and really finally defeat the beast, or we're gonna be in a very different reality, and we're gonna have to be, head on a swivel. This is where it's going to be at. Head on a swivel. And again, I'm going to play some stuff this week. I discovered this really interesting group. I'm going to play you one of their videos tomorrow. It's a hip hop group. I'm going to play you one of their videos tomorrow. So you want to tune into my show, 15 Minutes of Flame. There's definitely something happening on the wake up call tip. Let me tell you, there's a new cast of characters coming to the party. And they're pretty fucking interesting. I'm going to say that right now. All right. Let's see. What do we have here? Remember Trump at UN where he said, if you do not stand for your country, you have nothing. America's choice will determine the outcome. I saw an interview with Trump on Larry King over the weekend. And, Trump is basically saying the same thing then that he's saying now. Only then it was Japan, and now it's China. If anything, the guy's been pretty damn consistent with his message. That's what I'll say. Truth will be revealed this Scorpio season. More and more people. It's on, man. There's a lot of people waking up. The only thing that people need to be careful of is waking up into complacency and waking up into another dream or another illusion, thinking that they've woke up into some new level of truth. That's always the greatest trick, right? Okay, I want to talk briefly about these generations of fire. All right. So I want to go back in time because I think this is an important. These generations that are determined by fire are very important generations. So I'm going to go back in time here, and I'm going to do a little Mercury retrograde in here. Okay, so I'm going to go all the way back to the 19th century. And let's go back to the glory days of 1848, shall we? Why not? Why not? So somebody who was born in 1848, if they lived to be 100 years, they would have passed away in 1948, and that's an interesting time. Or even 1849. You get to 1949, 1950, you're born in 1848, that's a really big paradigm shift. Even if you get into, say, 1939 and you see airplanes and beginning to see like the first jets, major ocean liners, like that's a huge paradigm shift in that 90-year phase. So I'm going to take you back here, and let's look at. So let's show you this. So let's start here. The start of these latter degrees of Pluto and Aries, right here, right? Pluto and Aries. It's going to go back a bit further than that. Probably what about 1835, right? 1835. So we have Pluto and Aries, and we've gone through two Pluto cycles. Pluto in Aquarius, which was really after the theoretical United States moves out of Pluto and Capricorn, and there's that kind of sense that there's this new age, right? It's the new Atlantis. It's everything that Bacon and the founding fathers were trying to create. It's their new version of the new age. This is a new golden age, man. We got a new country. We got these new documents. We got these new ways of thinking, new ways of living, new opportunities. That's all Pluto and Aquarius, and it's democratic. It's democratic. There's going to be no kings. We get rid of the king with Pluto and Capricorn, the hierarchies, right? So then we go through a Pluto in Pisces phase, which is maybe a little more confusing, right? There's a little more confusing. Okay, we're not quite in that period where we're running off of the high of starting this new country, and we haven't quite gotten into this Pluto in Aries phase quite yet. So the Pluto and Pisces phase coincides, in my estimation, with it's like the Second Great Awakening. That's when people like Joseph Smith are born, and you have this kind of the rebirth of these charismatic faiths, or the birth of charismatic faiths which take place in the East Coast, and that's where revivalism starts up. It's more of a religious time than it is sort of a political time. And now, after that, we see the birth of these individuals that will play a significant role moving forward, right? So, we start with 1848. We're going to just keep going here. So Pluto and Aries, and it really cycles out of Aries, I think, around 1850, right around there. So let's find out, just take a quick gander at some of the people that are born roughly from, let's say, 1847 to 1850. Let's just take a look at some of those people. All right. So let's go. Let's start with 1847. All right. Okay. So births in 1847. Let's do a quick roll call here. Thomas Edison. Does that guy become a giant? You bet. Right. February 11th, 1847. Okay, who else do we have? Alexander Graham Bell, giant, you bet. Right there. There are other people that are less known, but quite influential. Otto Wallach, a German chemist, Nobel Prize laureate. Let's see. Joseph Pulitzer, Pulitzer Prize, 1847. Let's see. Who else do we have? Already, you got 3, 4 major people that will make a huge contribution. Jesse James, how about that? 1847. Let's see. Paul von Hindenburg, whom they named the blimp after. And what else do we have here? Okay, so we have three Pulitzer, Alexander Graham Bell, is that right? And Thomas Edison, giants. Okay. Pluto and Aries. We're talking Pluto and Aries. Let's move it up 1 year. Let's go to 1848. Okay. And births in 1848 include, let's see, who we have. Wyatt Earp, he's interesting. Is he a giant? Yeah, he's a myth. Let's see who else. So I think probably the most influential people born around 1848, Sir Thomas Lipton, the Scottish retailer. Of course, we get Lipton tea from Sir Thomas Lipton. At least it's a great brand. And I think those are he's probably the most significant person. Let's go to 1849. See what we have in 1849. Luther Burbank, very interesting guy when it came to agriculture. But he's not a giant. He's not like Bell. He's not like Edison. He's not like Pulitzer, who are major players in the fields. Pavlov, Mr. Pavlov's dog, is born in 1849. Let's see, who else? I'm interested in 1846 as well. Let's go to 1846. But somewhere in here, Rockefeller was born. He was born with Pluto in Aries. So Wild Bill Cody, 1846. And let's see. George Westinghouse. There's another. He's a giant. Westinghouse is a freaking giant. You know, he gets involved in the theoretical Tesla Edison feud, right? So he's born Pluto and Aries in 1846. So we have Westinghouse, we have Edison, we have Bell, we have Joseph Pulitzer, we have Pavlov, which is the birth of behavioralist psychology. Let's see. Let's go back one more year. Let's go to 1845. So I think Rockefeller is born in 1845. Okay, who we got? Births. Elihu Root was born in 1845. And let's see. Lippmann, the French physicist, Nobel Prize winner. These are people that are gonna really, let me just see Rockefeller. I want to see when David Rockefeller was born, because he's in this group somewhere too. I think so. David Rockefeller's father. Let's see, when was his father born? So Rockefeller was born in 1915. I want his father, John Rockefeller, John D. Rockefeller. That's who I want, not David Rockefeller. He's born later. Parents, John D. Rockefeller. Okay. All right, so John D. Rockefeller was born in 1874. 1874. All right, where's Pluto there? Let me just check. 1874. I think it's in Taurus at that point. Yeah, it's in Taurus. So you get a lot of the robber barons coming in with Pluto and Taurus. But you have people like Edison, you have Alexander Graham Bell, you have George Westinghouse, you have Pulitzer, and you just see what else we have here. Let's go to 1850. It's also theoretically the movement west, right, towards the Wild West. And we have people like Wild Bill Cody, Jesse James, these kinds of individualists, the myth, the myth, the American myth of the Wild West and the outlaw, all very Aries-like, right? Individualism. Okay, who else do we have here? So 1850, we have, who else? Henry Cabot Lodge, who's a major player on the American world stage, right? Huge player. Pat Garrett. So there's a lot of outlaw energy. There's a lot of individual energy, individualist energy here in the Pluto and Aries. So you have, again, people who are channeling or messing around with energy, Thomas Edison and Westinghouse. Pioneers. There's pioneering energy here. This is pioneering energy during Pluto and Aries. Absolute pioneering energy, especially like the movement west. William Wallace Lincoln, third son of Abraham Lincoln, he's born during this time. So I think what we're looking at is this kind of energetic sort of template, right? We have individualism taking place during Pluto and Leo. The guys that really profit on that are the robber barons who are born with Pluto and Taurus, which is interesting because they theoretically would be like the inheritors, right? They would be the inheritors. They would be the people that would come along later. And when I say I'm talking about inheritors, I'm talking about the people that come and like discover Tartaria, right? It would be those people because they're around 1950. Well, they're a little bit later, 1815. Let's see, what do we got? 1940, 1950. They come a little bit later, so they're kind of the exploiters. It's the people who show up right around the 1850s who are going to be born right around what I'd say probably around 1820, 1830. Let's just say 1820. That's what I see this group of people is. 1820. So these are the people who are going to be 30 years old, and they're coming in theoretically as the inheritors. Right? They come in and they see this, this country. Susan B. Anthony, Sherman, Tecumseh Sherman, the Civil War general. These are all births. So these are people who were born then. So about 1850, they're the ones that are coming in. Let's see, what else do we have? We got a Bonaparte. Not Napoleon, though. Jenny Lind, the opera singer. Okay. So it looks like to me that the Pluto and Aries energy is going to be pioneering. It's going to be outlaw energy. Jesse James, Pat Garrett, Billy the Kid, Thomas Edison, Westinghouse, Alexander Graham Bell. Let's see, Joseph Noble. Walter Lippmann, and I think does Nobel come in around that time? I think he does. Just see here, Nobel. Nobel Prize. Alfred Nobel. So Alfred Nobel is born in 1833. And that might be Pluto in Pisces. Let me just check. 1833. Oh, Pluto and Aries. So there we go. The father of explosives and dynamite, born in Pluto and Aries. So Pluto and Aries stretches roughly from about 1831 to about 1850. It's a long time. So you have Alfred Nobel, the guy who invented dynamite, explosives. You've got the outlaws. You've got people that are basically either recreating or reinventing electricity, telephone, and sound. And you have George Westinghouse, the guy that's going to put it all together into a network. So this is a very interesting group of people. They deal with power. Explosive power. They deal with the spirit of the pioneer. The people that come along with Pluto and Taurus are much more about the amalgamation and the extraction of resources. That's where you get Getty and Rockefeller and that group of people. They come along a little bit later, right? A little bit later. But it's that Pluto and Aries generation that kind of sets the table. Sets the table for everything in a lot of ways. The Pluto and Pluto and Taurus generation, they're exploiters. They are exploiters. The next generation that has fire associated with Pluto is Leo. And that generation changes everything. Right? Pluto and Leo changes everything. They change film, right? They change music. They change television. It's basically the boomer generation, Pluto and Leo. They're creative. At times they're insufferable. At times they're entitled. They're loved. They're hated. Whole 9 yards. But they're significant. We don't live in this world without Pluto and Leo and the contributions that Pluto and Leo made. They make them on a creative. We have a lot of the great sports figures are Pluto and Leo as well. They're born during that time. Some of them are notorious and some of them are legendary, absolutely legendary. You get people like, O.J. Simpson, Pluto and Leo, and Michael Jordan. Jordan's Pluto and Virgo, isn't he? Let's see, who else would be Pluto and Leo during that time? Anybody who was pretty prominent during the 1960s and the 1970s. Joe Montana, I think, is Pluto and Leo. There's a lot of great Pluto and Leo athletes, and they're tremendous, absolutely tremendous. Reggie Jackson, Pluto and Leo. Mr. October. I could dive into it and keep going. They change sports. Pluto and Leo change. Sports goes from being the sort of national sort of pastime, but Pluto and Leo takes charge, and they're on TV. You know, football's televised, basketball's televised, baseball's televised, and now all of a sudden, you know, these players, you know, get thrust onto a national stage and a world stage. So across the board, Pluto and Leo is huge. It's significant. Unfortunately, Bill Gates is Pluto and Leo, so we don't really want to talk about him in such glowing terms. I think Steve Jobs is Pluto and Leo too, if I'm mistaken. I mean, these are really seminal figures. These are, you know, whether you like them or hate them, or you know, they're seminal figures, and they play a major role here. So Pluto and Aries, fire generation, sort of gets things going, right? It's the energy. You know, it's the Edisons. I bet Tesla's born during that time too. So you have Edison, you have Tesla, you have Westinghouse, you've got the pioneers, you got the outlaws, you got the gunfighters, you know, you've got Alfred Nobel creating dynamite. That's all Pluto and Aries shit. But it's important, right? It's like the explosion. You know, it's the explosion of sort of the individual. It's the explosion of sort of, you know, these ideas in dealing and handling energy in a lot of ways. Pluto and Taurus comes around and exploits it, figures out how to control it, distribute it, make money off of it. Pluto and Leo, creative, massive force. Pluto and Sagittarius. This is the next generation. I'm telling you, this is the next generation. And and when we think of Pluto and Aries, we think of like raw, right? It's like will, it's power, it's force. It is Alfred Nobel throwing that stick of dynamite, blowing shit up, right? It is, you know, Edison, you know, trying to deal with this battery thing and throwing a switch, and then there's Tesla, and he's throwing his switch, and we got, you know, or whatever, you know, whatever Tesla did, and then we have Westinghouse, you know, trying to put it all together. I mean, that's what we're talking about. It's fire, it's primary fire, it's intensity, it's electricity, it's power, it's tapping into it. And Pluto and Leo takes to another level. It's creative. It has icons. It has heroes. It has gods and goddesses, and people rise and fall during Pluto and Leo. They all want to kill their father. No, that's only partially true. But then Pluto and Sag is the next phase. And this is the dawn of the philosophical light. I'm telling you, man, I've got faith in these. I got faith in the Zoomers. The Zoomers are going to take us into the 21st century. These kids are cool. I had a conversation today with my son. It was so fucking great. I got to tell you. It was so great. We sat down, and I haven't had a lot of sit-down conversations with my son for a while. We sat down. We had this great talk, and we started to get into politics a little bit. It was interesting. And he said to me, I'm very interested in Lenin. I'm like, oh, really? Well, this is interesting. So what are you interested in Lenin about? We started talking. I said, he said, well, so just kind of how it happened. I said, well, it's very interesting, isn't it? That him and a few other people with a lot of money could basically overthrow a massive population with not a lot of people in a pretty short amount of time, isn't it? He says, yeah, it is. He says, I think that's interesting. So we talked a little bit about that. And I'm like, he's not the only kid that's part of his generation that has this very interesting kind of philosophical mind. And I'm seeing more and more of this with these Pluto and Sag kids. And they're the third part of this triumvirate, right? It's like, again, Pluto and Aries is power. It's power. It's kind of the individual. It's the outlaw. You know, it's channeling power. Pluto and Leo is power on a social level. You know, it's power in terms of the media. It's power in terms of athletics and sport. You know, it's the time of the movie star or the great athlete. You know, it's Pluto and Leo. These Pluto and Sag kids, though, they are going to have a really advanced kind of higher mind, and we're going to need it. We're going to need it. It's these kids. I'm telling you, man. It's these Zoomer kids. They're the ones that they're gonna be that next fire generation. It'll be the fire of the higher mind, the fire of higher consciousness, and I have a lot of faith in them. They're the ones that they're gonna be creating the next philosophical, spiritual, religious, and moral template for the world to come. They will be the progenitors of the first turning. They'll be the progenitors of the first turning. They will be there 10 years from now, right? Which is when I think the first turning really comes in, 2030. And so theoretically, my kid would be, it's 27 during that time. And the younger ones would be around 24, 25. The older Gen Zs will be around 22, about 32, right around that. They're going to be a very interesting generation, and they're the next they're the template for the first turning. We're in the fourth turning now. This is the winter of our consciousness. Spring will come again, and these kids are the ones that are going to be the harbingers of the spring. And just like how they were, Pluto and Aries sort of captured that power and the zeitgeist of the individual and the pioneer, and channeling power. And then the generation to follow, which was the Pluto and Taurus people, sort of capitalizing on that. It's going to be the Pluto and Capricorn kids that are going to actually build the foundation of the next society. The Pluto and Sag kids will come up with the ideas. They will have the sort of the spiritual zeitgeist. They're going to be sort of this interesting balancing act of kind of anarchism, libertarianism, conservatism. The first generation has been more conservative than the one previous to it. Every generation prior has gotten less conservative. They're the ones that have backtracked a little bit, but I would not call them classically conservative. They're very different. So I have a lot of faith in them. Now, the Pluto and Scorpio generation, the millennials, you're going to have to deal with them. You're going to have to deal with them because they're different. They're coming at this thing from a whole different perspective. And I think Pluto, the millennials, I think the biggest role that the millennials are playing in a lot of ways is that they're helping us kind of sort of tear this world down. And in a way that I think can be both positive and negative. I really feel like that's the role for Pluto and Scorpio, is to kind of tear this thing down. And so that what remains, right? What remains ultimately is the best parts of it. That's how Scorpio operates. It burns through things. It reduces things. I was watching John Levi today, and I'm assuming John Levi's a millennial. Okay, he couldn't be more than about 35. So he's starting to study Fulcanelli in alchemy, which makes sense, right? Which totally makes sense. And what does John Levi do? He's tearing down reality. He's tearing down this idea of history and time. And I mean, this is the role that the millennials are supposed to play. And with Scorpio, the best parts are always left over. And Pluto and Sag takes that and says, this is the philosophy moving forward. This is the mindset. This is the zeitgeist. This is the Godhead. And then Pluto and Capricorn will come along and kind of rebuild things. They'll rebuild the things based on whatever kind of flash of philosophical insight sort of ripples through that generation. I'm actually really excited about the future. And I'm excited about the future not in a way that Klaus Schwab and the fourth industrial wave technocrats have in mind. And I don't think they're going to be successful ultimately. I really don't. I don't think they're going to be successful ultimately. They may have a minute or two, but it's not going to carry the day. and I'm convinced of that on many levels. So anyway, just a shout out to the Pluto. Let me just give you an example. So he took this test. He has this thing. He has this app on his phone, and he says, "Oh, yeah, you get to take this test, and it kind of tells you where you are politically." I'm like, "Really? You have it?" He says, "Yeah. Let me hear. You could take this. How long is it?" He said, "Oh, it's about 40 questions." So okay, I'll take the test. So I took the test, and he came in as kind of like a liberal, sort of libertarian. I'm okay with that. I'm all right with that. And so I took the test, and the test said that I was a cross between Stalin and Gandhi. He says, "That's so weird. That's so weird. You're right on this line. It's really..." I loved it. Stalin and Gandhi. I think that suits me. Stalin and Gandhi. All right, I got to get out of here. There you go. Pluto and Aries, Pluto and Leo, Pluto and Sag. The cycle of fire is complete. From the explosion of the individual to the fictionalization and the hyper mythology of the individual with Pluto and Leo, to Pluto and Sagittarius, who will be the conduits for channeling the divine inspiration of the mind of God. There we go. Bringing the cycle all the way back home. All right, I'm out of here. I'm done. I align with libertarians too. My niece and nephew, 8-10 years old, had Pluto and Capricorn. Man, those Pluto and Capricorn kids, you just wait. Those kids are going to be something else, man. They're really old souls. I've been watching them. I've been clocking them. All right, what do we have here? I don't think the global... No, I don't think they will either. They're not going to win. And they're going to have to... But we're going to have to stare it down. We have to face our worst nightmare. Businesses are blackmailed by the banksters. No loans. Some are interest-free. Makes sense. We're sure seeing things get torn down. Yeah. That's what Pluto and Scorpio is here to do. But the best parts will remain. The best parts will remain. Yeah, but do they want to go out on a date? I don't know if they do. I don't think that's what they're about. I'm not sure that's what they're about. Let's see. My son is Pluto and Sag. Yeah. Okay. What else? Everything else? Electricity, magnetism going hand in glove. Yes. Sally, one of my great uncles, worked with Lenin in Russia. Lenin is an interesting study, man. I mean, Lenin understood human psychology. You know, he understood human psychology. He was a bloodthirsty, cold, sociopathic motherfucker, but he understood human psychology, and he left a map for us to understand it as well. Right? This is what these people do. They leave maps for us. They leave maps. They show us. If we don't learn from them, then it's on us. You know, then we're at fault. I miss the old days. People needs. I think you're at the globe. No, they won't win. They're not going to win. I've been having too many really solid conversations with these kids, man. These Zoomers. They're not all the same either, by the way. You know, my kids said they're about 50-50. I won't get into what the 50-50 thing is. All right, I'm out of here. For tonight. Thanks for being here. Thanks for showing up. If you like the show, hit the thumbs up, pass along. I know 2 hours and 48 minutes is a lot, but yay. Just pick out a piece and say, hey, go to the end. He starts talking about the Pluto and Sag kids, or go to the beginning. He's really talking about Sean Connery. Yep, we're going to bed tonight. Night, Steve. Night, Chris. Night, everybody else. God bless y'all. Love you. See you tomorrow. 15 minutes flame. Use your head in order to discern what's real. Your heart say what's possible. I am doing readings. Come to RobPhoenix.com. Check me out. and take good care. Sweet dreams. Good night.